Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video, and today we're going to be looking at this map and analyzing some long-term trends, in some of these swing states and taking a look at where I think most states are trending. So before we get started with this video, this is like a really ambiguous video. I think that for a lot of these states, there's not really going to be a right answer. And by that I mostly mean it is so hard to forecast trends, even 4 years in the future. Some of the trends we've seen are so wacky and so unpredictable that, if you come back to this video in 4 years, a lot of these states that I label as trending towards a party, that might turn into a complete joke, and I'm going to be fully accountable for that. Because predicting trends is really hard to do, and I don't generally try to do it, but because a bunch of you guys were asking for this video, I'll give my thoughts, I'll show you where my head's at, and then we can have a discussion about that. I also asked for some maps on Twitter that I'll put up at the end briefly. This video is going to go long because it's 50 states, and I don't want to, skim over them because trends are really, really tough to talk about, and there's a lot to unpack there. But if you did submit a map on Twitter, I will do my best to show it. But yeah, so that being said, I don't want to talk for too long at the beginning or the end. We're just going to hop right into it. We're going to go geographical order from Alaska to Maine. So I think Alaska's going to trend blue. This is mostly because the Republicans don't really have a ton of room to grow anywhere. They might, you can say, I guess, that they're going to improve with Native American voters because they did in 2020. And yeah, that might be true, but, when you talk about areas like North Slope Borough, that is 7,000 people. So yeah, the Republicans did 10 points better there than they did in 2016, or Trump did. But that is really insignificant because, to be frank, no one lives there, so it doesn't really matter. What matters more is the Democrats are improving in Anchorage. I think Biden was the first Democrat to win Anchorage in a very long time. The city itself, I should clarify. And they're probably going to start to improve in Fairbanks as well, though Fairbanks is probably a few years behind Anchorage. And, Democrats have been increasingly competitive in statewide races in Alaska. And by competitive, I don't mean Alaska's not a toss-up by any means in 2022 or 2024. But, Kerry lost Alaska by 30, and Biden only lost it by 10. And so I think this trend has been kind of in the making for a while because cities like Anchorage are getting less oil-dominated and more, diverse and more college-educated, and more people are moving to Alaska. So I think because of that, it's going to start to trend blue. Now, Hawaii, on the other end, I think is kind of having a bit of a red trend. I don't really see it going anywhere. I think Hawaii is going to be blue for a very long time. But Republicans are doing a little better with voters of color, and and by that I mean Trump did say he won, I think, a state Senate district in Hawaii in 2020 when he did not in 2016. It's because he did better with Native American voters in Hawaii. And I just think that in general we're seeing some kind of demographic shifts within the Democratic Party that aren't favorable to them, with Native Americans and Hispanics specifically, and I think in Hawaii it's going to start to cost them a little bit. But it's a D plus 40 state. It might be D plus 37 in 10 years from now, but again, it does not really matter. California's got, I'd say, a slight Democratic trend. I don't really mean too much here, and same with Oregon and Washington. I think Washington and Oregon a little more so than California. We might see, because the thing with California is that it's so big that even at the same end of the state, I think it really differs, because Hispanics in Los Angeles are going to vote very differently from those at the east end of San Bernardino or Riverside County, if that makes sense. I think that the two most important factors in determining how a person votes are race and region, and by region I mean urban, rural, suburban, exurban. And so I think, rural Hispanics are getting more Republican, and, kind of in this side of California, the Republicans might do a little better in the eastern parts of Imperial County or, Riverside. But it doesn't really matter because I don't really see a path for Republicans to even improve with Hispanics in Orange County or in Los Angeles County or, in the north, in the Bay Area. Republicans have made, no inroads since, really 2012. And Trump didn't even win a precinct in San Francisco or San Mateo County. Actually, I don't think any in Alameda either. So, he did not really do well in California. He lost it by, I think, like half a point less than 2016, but that's only because some third-party voters shifted towards him in, like, rural California. But I think California's going to stay blue. Oregon, Washington, I think, are kind of the same thing here. I'm just going to kill two birds with one stone here. Both these have large cities like Portland and Seattle that are dominating the state. And, yeah, these cities themselves are probably going to stay, where they are. Like, they're not going to get bluer. But the suburbs in these counties, like Clackamas County, I think, is going to become a more Democratic stronghold than a swing county. And I think you could say the same thing about areas like Clallam and Washington, or, I forget the name of the county, but there's a county that is in southern Washington. It's where the city of Vancouver is. I think it might actually be called Vancouver County. I'm not going to guarantee that, though. Someone's going to fact check me. But I think that if you're talking about the populations of these states as a whole, I think they're getting more college educated than they were already, which, these are some of the most educated states in the country. And I just don't think that there's a ton of room for the GOP to, like there's room for them to grow, but there's not a path for them to improve. And, until they lay out that path, I'm not going to say that they're going to improve, because just not how it works. Nevada's trending red, but, Nevada's basically, I'll just say no trend, because I think it's different, because Republicans, I think, have kind of maxed out the rural areas. And I was talking to someone the other day, last week, and I was asking him about, Nevada rural areas. And he was like, yeah, I don't think the rurals can get any more rural, so I'll stick with that. I'll trust him there. And I think the Democrats are going to continue to in Washoe County. Clark is tough because, Republicans are going to, in all honesty, I don't really know how Hispanics going to trend in 2022. That's probably a question for political talk, or someone else who's smarter than me. But what I am going to say is that rural Hispanics in Nevada are already pretty Republican, or at least more Republican than you'd expect. And I think the urban Hispanics might get a little more Republican, but it doesn't really matter, because areas like Henderson and Paradise Valley and Paradise, that's another city. Paradise, Henderson, Enterprise are all getting bluer. Like suburban Las Vegas is going to get bluer. And so even if Republicans somehow do better with Hispanics in Clark County, which they might do, I don't really see it going anywhere. So I think Nevada is going to be kind of like Florida, and that the Democrats are going to consistently win it, or the party's going to lose by 2 or 3% pretty consistently. I think Montana's got a pretty clear blue trend, and, the Republicans are going to probably sweep 2022, 2024, 2026, 2028, but I think by 2030 we could see some competitive races here. Like, they've got a Senate race there in 2030. I'm not going to forecast a race in 8 years, that's weird to say, in 8 years from now it'll be 2030. But there's the state that are growing, Missoula, Bozeman, Butte, I think, are all outweighing whatever trends the Republicans have going for them in rural Montana. So I do think that Montana is going to get bluer. Idaho, I'll say the same thing for. I think, Boise is going to... So here's the thing. When people move to Idaho, they're mostly moving to Boise. And as a result of that, the Boise is getting more diverse. It's getting more, socially diverse, in that I think I saw a graph that said that Idaho had I think their LGBTQ, the population identified as LGBTQ plus, nearly doubled since 2000. And obviously it's good that people are comfortable being themselves now, because I think it's super important to not be homophobic and just not be for lack of a better word, not be bigoted in general. But, especially in more conservative areas, I think people are starting to feel more and more comfortable to come out as gay, or as, say that they're transgender. And and I'm mostly bringing this up because I think that it's evident that Idaho's still a very conservative state, but I think in areas like Boise, it's getting more and more liberal, more and more diverse. And, long term, because of that, Boise could start to dominate the state, kind of like Chicago dominates Illinois. Because, no one's really moving to rural Idaho. And if they are, it's at a much lower rate than people are moving to Boise. And so I think, in 50 years from now, Boise might dominate Idaho the way that Chicago dominates Illinois. Wyoming, I'll say trending Democrat, but, it's not really going to go anywhere. Utah's definitely got a clear blue trend, though. I think Utah's might be the most obvious on this list, or up there. And I say this because Utah has a very, very evident trend to the Democrats, so much so that I would not be surprised if it just, I'll be honest here, I would not be stunned if Utah, goes, gets competitive 10 years earlier than we expect. Because I think I've read, I see on Twitter, Utah will be competitive in 2045 or whatever, 2024, I guess, the presidential election. I would not be surprised if it's, 2036 and Utah's, within 5% for whatever party, probably the Republicans. And I say this mostly because, rural Utah is not that big. The reason that Republicans do so well in Utah right now is because of Utah County, which is home to Provo, and, they do reasonably well in Ogden and West Jordan and, St. George. There's going to be a day where the Republicans start to, only get 50 to 55% of the vote in Provo, and that's going to be their downfall. It's not they're not going to lose ground in rural areas, but the second that they stop winning Provo by, the insane margins they're winning it by right now, Utah's going to get a lot bluer. And so I think by by the 2048 or whatever, I could easily see Utah going blue because the Democrats, Salt Lake City's growing at a massive rate. It's a very educated city, or it's going to be a very educated city in a few years. I shouldn't say a few, but in some years from now, basically the tech industry is making Salt Lake a hub. Of the Four Corners, I think Salt Lake is one of the fastest growing cities in America, and so I think actually I think Boise is the fastest growing city. So Idaho too. So yeah. Now going over to Arizona. So Arizona, I think it's overrated for how blue it's trending. I do think that Arizona is. Oh, by the way, I meant that California's only narrowly trending Democrat. By the way, I don't think I mentioned this, but the lighter your state is, so Utah's getting really blue, trending really blue. California's only trending a little bit blue, I guess. Arizona, I think the Republicans, they're gonna. I think at some point they're gonna hit their floor, which is maybe 43-45% of the vote. And again, when I say that, I mean, yeah, it's obviously hard to predict trends in 10 years from now. But the Republicans are going to hit a point where they're not going to continue losing the suburbs. I get if trends continue in 20 years from now, Republicans are going to be getting 30% in Maricopa County, but that's just not realistic. They're going to hit a point where they're going to hit the floor and they're just going to maybe start to gain again for whatever reason. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot predict demographic and education shifts 20 years from now. It's hard enough to do right now. I'm not going to do it in 20 years I'm not going to be predicting it 20 years from now. But Arizona, I think, is a state that will trend blue mostly because Hispanic voters that, Hispanics themselves, I think, are going to get a little more Republican. Let me just lay this out because I don't want to say it more than once. Hispanics are getting more Republican. I do not think that means the Republicans are going to win the Hispanic vote anytime soon or anytime even in my lifetime. What I do think is going to happen is I think, the Republicans are going to go from getting 28% of the Hispanic vote to 33 to 34% of the Hispanic vote. Maybe 40% in a really good election for them whenever that happens. That being said, I do not think Republicans are going to somehow win Hispanics in 20 years from now with 55% of the vote. It's just not realistic. What is going to happen is Hispanic voters in Arizona are going to grow. They're going to become a bigger share of the population. And yeah, the Democrats might lose a bit of a margin there, but it's worth it for them if Hispanics go from making up 28% of the population to 38% of the population. When you have a state like Arizona that's so diverse, it's getting more diverse, it's getting more college educated, you're going to see that trend blue. The Republicans, I think they're going to stop, falling in the suburbs in maybe 8 to 10 years from now. Cities like Mesa, Glendale, Scottsdale, they're going to keep getting bluer until they really stop, for lack of a better explanation. So I think that, Arizona's going to, trend blue. Maybe it'll get to a D plus 9 or 10 state, and then it'll just kind of stay stagnant like Nevada. Nevada's kind of like Arizona in that, it was trending blue 15 years ago. Now it's just okay, it stayed at D plus 2.4 for 6 years. By the way, I just decided while I was explaining that I'm only going to do half the country. I'm not going to do the East Coast. We're going to stop it right here at this line, and then I'll do a part 2. Mostly because I'm too lazy to film a 45-minute video, and also because I think you guys don't want to watch that. Colorado's also very clearly trending blue. That's probably because of the Denver area. I actually don't know too much about Colorado politics. Obviously, I know how it votes. I can, analyze House races, but when it comes down to the county by county stuff, I'm not as good at Colorado as I am, or as I hope to be in other regions. So I'll kind of keep it short here. Colorado is the only state that actually the polls underestimated Biden in 2020. He won it by a point more than he was supposed to win it. It's super minor, but I think that's a reflection of how much the Democrats have to grow, because they're still getting killed in rural Colorado. they're going to keep getting murdered in, the rural eastern parts. Now, what I do want to point out, though, is that they still have a bit of room to fall with Hispanics in the western. Like, for whatever reason, Hispanic voters, I think, in the eastern counties vote, like, more Republican than those in the west, despite them both being pretty rural areas. I think that Colorado Hispanics might start to trend a little red, like, a little more Republican than you might expect, but it doesn't really matter, because, like, at the end of the day, I think Hispanics make up less than a fifth of the population in Colorado, and no matter what, Democrats are improving in the Denver metro. They're improving in areas that were, kind of like Utah. They used to be super red, and, in areas like Fort Collins, Greeley, Colorado Springs even, which is a pretty big city, by the way, big enough to make its own congressional district if you use the entire county. In those areas, Democrats are going to start to make the margins a little smaller for Republicans, because, like, Republicans are getting, like they're winning urban areas in Colorado still. I know Colorado's a blue state, but they're still winning, like the Republicans. Trump won Greeley in 2020. I think he won Colorado Springs, although I'm not sure. I think he did. No matter what, he did really well there, even if he only lost by a point. And for lack of a better word, I think Colorado is, like, has kind of, I usually say trends that can't slow up, but, like, they have different trends, but one trend is so much bigger than the other that it doesn't matter. It's going to trend blue. So I think Colorado, very clearly trending blue, but they do have multiple trends going on at once, but the trends that are trending Democratic outweigh those that are trending Republican by a lot. New Mexico, yeah, I made a video, but I'm confident that New Mexico is trending red. I know that's a really hot take, and I shouldn't have it. I'll put it as lean, I guess. Whoa, my clicking needs to get better. The thing with New Mexico is that it's already pretty urban. Like, the Democrats don't really win too many counties. Like, they win counties, but the reason they do well in New Mexico is because they do so well in Albuquerque and Santa Fe, and, like, the rest of the state does not really matter. And yeah, they're going to keep doing that. And I think New Mexico is going to stay a blue state for for years to come. I'm not thinking it's going to flip in 2024 or anything. I'm not someone who thinks that. But what I am going to say is that I do think that Republicans are going to start to make inroads with rural Hispanics. Because, like, New Mexico is weird because Biden won it by more than Clinton. And Hitchley, I think, did, semi-well with Hispanics in New Mexico, despite the fact that he got crushed with Hispanics in Texas and Florida. And so, whether that's for, like, there are two explanations for this. One, or A, is that New Mexico Hispanics are, obviously, all voting blocks in general are different by state. Like, white voters in California vote very differently from white voters in West Virginia. Hispanics in Florida vote very differently from those in California. I'm not denying that. What I am saying is that there was a uniform swing in a lot of places, like the South, like Texas and Florida specifically, which I keep bringing up because they're the biggest states. And those Hispanic voters shifted to the right by a lot, and often cost Hispanics in Miami-Dade. Had they come out for Biden the way they did for Clinton, he might have won Florida, or not. I shouldn't say only Miami-Dade, but what I will say is that had Biden done as well as Clinton with Hispanics in Florida, like statewide, I think he might have actually won Florida. I'm not sure. You might want to do the math for me, but I think he did the math a while ago, and I think he would have won it by under a point. Whatever, it doesn't really matter, but. New Mexico, for whatever reason, Hispanics did not, like, trend right. I think it's mostly because Trump stopped making a play for New Mexico after, like, July, whereas he was very invested in Florida because he knew he needed it. And I think that, the second Republicans start to take New Mexico seriously, which I think they will in maybe 8 years from now, they're probably going to do a lot better there because they've given up on it. Like, ever since 2012, I think they've really given up on New Mexico. And as a result, Hispanics in Mexico have not trended right the way they have in Texas or Florida because Biden spent a lot more time in Texas and Florida than he did in New Mexico. Same with Trump. And so because of that, I think Republicans have a lot of upside in New Mexico. Does that necessarily mean that they're going to win it? No, but I think it is going to start to trend right. Now, the Dakotas, I think they're the same thing. I don't really think they're trending anywhere. The Republicans are going to, like, keep winning the rural areas. But actually, you know what? I'll say they're both narrowly trending Democrat. The Republicans, the GOP is going to keep winning rural areas by really good margins, but the Democrats have kind of hit, like, they've been at 30% in these states, often 27% even in bad elections, for, like, it's been 10 years since 2012 now. I almost said it was 8, because, like, my brain, by the way, my brain still thinks it's 2020 for some reason. I don't know why it does this, but, like, my brain, like, automatically thinks it's 2020, maybe because 2020 was such an insane year, but, no, it's been 10 years since the Democrats have stopped gaining in 12 even since 2010, I guess I'll say. It's been 12 years since Democrats have, like, not gained in New Mexico, and so, wait, did I say Mexico? Okay, you know what? It's been 12 years since the Democrats have stopped gaining in the Dakotas. 2008, Obama did very well in the Dakotas. He didn't win them, obviously, but he lost South Dakota by, like, 5 and North Dakota by, like, 10 or something like that, which is really, really good for a Democrat in the Dakotas. And, yeah, Heidi Heitkamp won in 2012, but, that's a whole separate story for another time. Or, like, Rick Berg was a disaster of a candidate for the GOP. But, anyways, my point here is that, like, yeah, Republicans are going to win the Dakotas for, like, my entire lifetime, pretty much. But the Democrats have hit such a bad point that they've got to start, like, the Democrats have got to, at some point, win Fargo, Grand Forks, and Sioux Falls, right? Like, they've got to win those cities at some point. And if they don't, I'll be wrong, but I think the Democrats are, like, going to gain a couple percentage points in the Dakotas in the 2020s. I don't really know where that's going to do them any good, because the Dakotas are only going to have one congressional district, and they're only going to have statewide races federally. So, yeah. Nebraska, yeah, I think Nebraska is a pretty obvious one. Same with Kansas. I'll put them as, actually, thinking of the districts, I might as well just say that wrong district. I will say this district is trending blue lightly. The third, which I think is most Republican, is going to, like, stay where it is, or maybe a little more Republican, whatever, I guess. But then Nebraska as a whole is trending quite blue. And actually, I'll put this right here just to avoid confusion. So, Nebraska as a whole trending blue. Nebraska's second district, which is this district right here, Omaha, pretty much trending blue. Nebraska, the outer district, that's 24 Republicans, definitely trending blue. It's the most blue-turning district in the state. Democrats in Nebraska have actually, most people don't know this, and this is, like, a fact that, like, I love because it's so under-discussed. The Nebraska Democrats in the state legislature are, like, amazing at winning elections. Like, every close election they win. Like, Democrats hold a few state legislative seats there that are, like, Trump was 25. And they win them because the Nebraska Democratic Party is actually very, very good at winning local races. Now, they obviously are not good at winning statewide races because they lose by 30 points every time. But when it comes to local races that are a little more competitive, they generally do quite well. And so I think that it's good for the Democrats to have the party infrastructure, because in 20 years from now, when Nebraska starts to get competitive, that's going to matter. And Democrats, obviously, Biden was the best performing Democrat and presidential Democrat in Nebraska in a very long time. He won Lincoln, he won Douglas, he only lost Sarpy County by 11. Sarpy is like the ex-urban county of Omaha, and he only lost it by 11. It was like, I think Clinton lost it by 19. Biden lost it by 11, and I think it's probably going to be within 6 or 7% in 2024, maybe even closer. So I think Nebraska is going to keep getting bluer. There's a lot of good trends for Democrats in Nebraska. They're going to, I think, start to do well here. They're probably going to, I think in 2030, the Republicans are probably just going to draw them a vote sink in Omaha that maybe goes to Lincoln. Maybe, I'm not sure. Because Omaha is growing and it's getting more and more blue and more diverse and more college educated, which creates more and more Democratic votes. So, we'll have to see. But I think Nebraska, no matter what, the rural areas are pretty red, but they're not growing, whereas the cities of Omaha and the cities of Lincoln are, exploding in population, and they're getting more and more Democratic. So I think Nebraska is going to get blue in maybe 30 years, if I had to guess. But again, don't quote me on that in 30 years from now, because just don't. Because it's really hard to predict trends 30 years from now. Kansas, what I will say about Kansas is that I think Kansas going blue is slightly overrated. I'll actually put it as likely, because the Democrats, yes, they do have a lot of good trends for them in the Kansas City area and in the Wichita area. They're probably going to win Wichita in 2028, if I had to guess. But I still think that rural Kansas actually isn't declining in population as fast as rural Nebraska or rural Wyoming or rural Dakotas. So I think Kansas might, because people act like Kansas is, getting super Democratic, which, yeah, it's getting bluer for sure, but it's just, Kansas as a state is not going to all of a sudden become blue in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye. So I think the Democrats in Kansas are going to do well. In the 2040s, I think, is when they start to be competitive. Because, Kansas City, Olathe, Overland Park, Topeka, they're all getting bluer. They're all diversifying, they're getting bluer. And, yeah, and, again, the Kansas City suburbs are exploding in population, too, which is why, by the way, quote me on this, because I'll go on the record here. I think the Democrats are going to probably get a vote sink in Kansas City in that congressional seat. The Republicans are probably going to draw a seat that's going to be David's plus 25 or whatever, that it's going to they're just going to draw her a vote sink, because I think the Republicans are so scared of trends in suburban Kansas City, because the suburbs of Kansas City are getting so much more Democratic that I think the Republicans know that, and they're very scared, and they're going to in their redistricting process are going to draw a vote sink for the Democrats to just pack all those votes into one district, by the way. So I think that's it for Kansas, trending blue because of the big cities. Oklahoma is also going to start to trend blue. Actually, you know what? Actually, no. I take that back. It's trending Republican barely. I think OKC and Tulsa have some favorable trends for Democrats, but, Democrats aren't going to, do worse than they're already doing, because they're already doing so badly in Oklahoma. Biden literally lost Oklahoma by, 42% in 2020. But what I do think is worth noting is that unlike Idaho or Kansas or Nebraska or Utah too, Oklahoma does not have the city that's booming. OKC is growing, but it's not it's not gaining Democrats. It's probably gaining both Republicans and Democrats, and it's probably just going to stay, at a narrowly Democratic city forever, which is not the recipe for success for Democrats in Oklahoma. So I don't think Oklahoma is going to go blue, ever. Now, this is just for Texas, because I knew that I'd get this, somewhere. So, I do think Texas is trending blue. I think it's quite obvious. I think people who say Texas is trending red don't fully understand what they're saying. And so, I'll just debunk an argument that I know I'm going to get in the comments, because I don't think most people are going to listen to the entire video, because you're just going to skip to the end to see where I think every state's trending. But here's what I'll say, I guess. Parts of Texas is a massive state. Not every county in Texas is going to trend blue when I say it's trending blue. The state as a whole is going to get more Democratic, but the state of Texas, many counties are going to get more and more Republican as I age. And I think there's no denying that in any state, no matter what you think it's trending. And the Republicans are going to do very, very well in the Rio Grande Valley. They did very well there in 2020. They won a lot of rural Hispanic voters that had not voted Republican since 2004, or even, in their lifetime. And I fully expect the Democratic Party to have a severe, not severe, but I guess a serious process of thought. I'm forgetting the word. It's, I guess, reconciliation, because they are going to start to lose rural Hispanics in Texas very soon. They didn't lose them in 2020, but it got a heck of a lot closer. We saw counties that voted, they're small counties, they're counties that only have a few thousand people that only cast a few hundred or a few thousand votes, so they don't really mean that much in the grand scheme of things, but we saw counties Starr County or Jim Hogg County or Zapata County that were, voted for Clinton by 50%, and then they voted for Trump. Not by a ton. Maybe, I think Zapata was Clinton plus 40, and then Trump won it by 5. But there's still counties that are getting more Republican. And we can talk about whether it's a Trump thing. It might be a Trump thing. I don't know. Probably isn't, though, because Hispanics in Texas have been getting more Republican for a while. Relative to the national environment, they have been, and I think that denying that is unproductive. Now, the reason that Texas is turning blue is because the Rio Grande Valley is a big geographical region, and it has cities like El Paso and Laredo and I'm forgetting the other city, McAllen. But what matters is that it's so small relative to the rest of the state that even if the Rio Grande Valley is fully red in 40 years from now, Texas will still be blue because of the Dallas-Fort Worth area and the Houston area and the San Antonio area, the Austin area. because Texas is growing, and the people that are moving to Texas are primarily white liberals from California and New York who are moving there because of housing prices. And so when you see this, Texas is getting bluer, and I shouldn't say Texas, but the Austin and San Antonio suburbs are getting bluer. Like George W. Bush in 2004, just put in perspective. Not only did he do really well in Texas because he's from Texas, but he won Dallas. He won the city of Dallas, the kind that the city of Dallas is in. He did extremely well there. And Biden, that's the county that Biden won, as you can see, by 32%. In Tarrant County, I know for a fact, Bush won Tarrant County by 30%. And Biden won it by a point. Denton and Collin were about 5-point Trump. Dunn was an 8-point Trump victory. Collin was a 4-point Trump victory. Just because I can scroll, because I have this luxury. Collin County voted for George W. Bush in 2004 by, Collin. He won 71% of the vote there. And it's a county that, as you can see, Biden lost by 4. So that's literally a 46% swing in just that suburban county alone. And I bet that both these counties flip in 2024, even if it's Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee. Both these counties are probably going to flip. And that's because Democrats are moving to these areas. They're moving to suburban Dallas, and they're voting Democrats. Same with Travis. Williamson flipped. Williamson, if we scroll down to the bottom here, Williamson was a county that voted for Bush by a ton. Yeah, he won Williamson by 32. Biden won Williamson, first Democrat to do so in 30 years or something. He won Travis, where Austin is. He did very well in Hayes. He also won Bexar County, which is in where San Antonio is. So yes, some of these areas down here are trending red, and there's no denying that. But the counties Zapata, which is the county that Trump lived that he won by 5% that I mentioned. I'll pull up the trend map right here. Yes, Zapata County. Zapata. It got much, much more Republican. But when you look at the size here, Trump won Zapata with 2,000 votes. Biden won Tarrant with 411,000 votes. People whenever I say Texas trending blue, people are okay, yeah, Tarrant and Dallas Fort Worth suburbs are getting blue, but what about Zapata County that was a Clinton plus 30 county that voted for Trump? That is such an irrelevant comparison because no one lives in Zapata County. Trump won 2,000 votes in Zapata County. Biden won 410,000 in Tarrant County. If the Republicans are trading Zapata for Tarrant in the Rio Grande Valley for suburban Dallas and Austin, that is a very dumb trade for them to make, and that's why they're going to lose Texas. Yes, there are trends in Texas that favor Republicans, but they are trends that are so minuscule relative to the trends that favor Democrats that it's not worth time to say that Texas is trending red. If I'm proven wrong, I'll eat it. I will absolutely say, I did not see that coming. But what I'm saying about Texas is that, mathematically speaking right now, the Republicans have not gained votes as a percentage in 30 years in Texas. And that's not going to stop just because you think it's going to, just because you want it to stop. I don't want to go into a rant about Texas, but I think it's really frustrating how people, discount the inroads Democrats have made in Texas just because of one election where Trump flipped a few counties that have 2,000 people in them. And I just want to pull up this tweet because I wanted to bring it up. Since compared to 2004, where Bush won Texas by 23%. Bush got 4.5 million votes in Texas in 2004. Trump got, 1.3 million more. So, Trump did very well in Texas in 2020. He won it by more than most people thought. Kerry got 2.8 million votes in Texas in 2004, as you can see right here. He got 2.8 million votes in Texas. Biden doubled that, almost. Biden almost doubled that. And if Texas Democrats double Biden's amount of votes in, 2036 or whatever, they're going to win Texas by a lot. Because Biden did 18% better than Bush in Texas, and he didn't even do that well. He could have done a lot better. He could have won Texas, I think, if he, actually had a good outreach program for Hispanic voters and, actually won Collin and Denton County. He didn't need to win Texas, and he didn't really campaign there at the end. He went to I think he went to Texas once in October, but, come on, I think I knew that he was done in Texas. But, I genuinely think that Biden could have done a lot better in Texas than he actually did. And he still did a lot better than Kerry. He still only lost Texas by 5%, and that just shows how much the Democrats have to grow in Texas. So that'll be it for this video. I'm getting tired of talking. I'll film the next one tomorrow, so you'll get a 2-day stretch where I'll have uploads, do this part of America. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. This was not scripted. It was 35 minutes of just me talking and analyzing trends. But again, if you enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.